I'll start off with the weird but still tame furry stories, and as time goes on, I'll dive into the disturbing and very illegal. I went through a lot of suffering while making this. I'll show you the clip without context first. Yep. There's not really a whole ton of context behind this video. It may look creepy and haunt you in your dreams, but North Fur FX, the creators behind this abomination, are just a few artists who do latex prosthetic masks for furries, but also movies and theaters as well. They got Shrek, but also various animals such as vampire bats, crows, donkeys, and the list goes on. Straight nightmare fuel, but for only a couple $100 you can turn yourself into every animal, ogre, monster you want. The pizza incident refers to an event that happened at Big Lil FurCon, which is a furry convention. On September 22nd, 2021, Maine Wolfie created a poll asking if anybody wants to release their bodily fluids onto his pizza that he would order during the BLFC. The poll got 577 votes, with almost 70% being in favor of releasing their fluids. And everybody attending his party would get free pizza nonetheless, so win-win I guess. Finally, on October 22nd, during the second day of Big Lil FurCon, Maine Wolf hosted a pizza party. He ordered 6 pizzas, and yes, one of them would meet its disturbing fate. He would later post a tweet confirming that 19 people released their children onto that unlucky pizza. Here's a picture for you. Let it burn into your retina. Now that might have been a little weird, but fortunately the group decided against eating the pizza and just left it outside in the hallway instead. And this part actually started a bit of controversy, since a couple of Twitter people, correctly so, tweeted that a hotel hallway wouldn't be the best place to leave such a pizza, since minors can work as cleaning staff, and cleaning staff typically has enough to deal with in general. So the pizza was promptly disposed of. After it sat in the hallway for 3 hours, a few people touched it, and a few people hopefully lied about their actions. Nobody was actively hurt in the process though, which will not be the case for the later stories. In 2015, a person called Magnus Deridian, or his real name Robert Sokovsky, would create a fursuit that was politically charged, to say the least. His suit was basically a walking Confederate flag. If you don't know what the Confederate flag stands for, go look it up. But for many, it's linked to the defense of slavery, not all people being created equally, etc. It's used by various groups, such as the Ku Klux Klan. I think that paints a good enough picture. This political kind of vibe fit perfectly with the current time, since the elections were just around the corner, and Magnus was actively promoting Trump. Since the furry community more often than not tends to be more on the other side of the political spectrum, he obviously got a bit of hate on Twitter and stuff. But that would be nothing compared to the next events that'll happen. And they're hilarious and disturbing at the same time. Magnus would decide to take a suit to the Midwest Fur Fest, which is another furry convention. He was detained and banned from the convention relatively quickly for his own safety, since people started noticing his suit and were obviously annoyed. But Magnus did not give up. 2 years later, in 2017, Magnus would try again and attend the Anthrocon, but this time he actually tried to conceal the flag under a white sheet. His suit was obviously still against Anthrocon's policies, so he was kicked out. But they actually found out that he has not paid for his membership, so he was banned from the whole convention until he made payments, which I'm not sure if he ever did. Now his last appearance probably takes the cake though. During the Midwest Fur Fest in 2017, Magnus tried to sneak into the convention, the one that he got banned from before, but he was still noticed since he literally wore a German World War I helmet as part of his fursuit in the hotel lobby. And he supposedly also said some pretty racist stuff and just stuff you shouldn't say in general. Because of all of that, he was arrested December 1st in his underwear. What a way to start the month. He then proceeded to create a GoFundMe campaign to try to raise money for any legal fees, but the campaign was deleted. Most likely because nobody would give up their hard-earned money for this cause. Now, all of these events weren't actually his first controversy, since Magnus had quite a long history of criminal charges before all of this happened, and that is also why he's gonna come up in the next story as well. This happened in 2014 during the Midwest Fur Fest. That convention has gone through some stuff, bro. That year, over 5,400 furries were just happily talking and chilling, just doing their thing. Everything went well until December 7th, the last night of the event. A chlorine gas attack sent 19 attendees to the hospital. Some furries on the 9th floor of the hotel were just doing their thing when they started smelling this disgusting odor that wasn't coming from another furry, but something else. It got so bad that at 12:45 a.m. they decided to call the Rosemont Public Safety Department to see what's going on. By 1 a.m. the entire hotel was evacuated. and everyone inside the hotel was sent over to the Stevens Convention Center. When firefighters checked out the scene, they found a broken glass jar with white powder in it on the 9th floor stairway, and there was also some kind of liquid on the walls too, not the type of liquid that was on the pizza though. It turns out the air contained crazy levels of chlorine gas, which was most likely not very good for your lungs. Just my guess though. Right after the gas leak, the police said that it looked like someone did this on purpose, and so they launched a criminal investigation. The police and even the FBI talked to suspects, hotel guests, employees, and even hospital staff. This was a big deal now. The people attending these furry events were scared because they didn't know if these attacks would keep coming, and a big convention was coming up as well. The FBI kept digging into the case, and one of the main suspects was the one and only Magnus. First, if Magnus would be the actual perpetrator, it wouldn't have been his first chemical attack. As already said, his criminal history is quite long, and so the police actually searched his apartment. They didn't really find anything except for a roll of red duct tape, which belonged to one of his roommates. But they did confiscate the duct tape because it looked very similar to the one that was used for the construction of the gas device jar. When he was asked where he was between 11 and 12:30 AM on that day, he said that he was on the higher floors with one of his roommates, which would also align with the fact that it all happened on the 9th floor. But at the end, there wasn't any concrete evidence to actually prove that Magnus was at fault here, and he obviously denies it himself. So this is all just alleged. Now let's go down a level into the more disturbing things. Hypnotist Sappho, also known as Valerie, was a 21-year-old, relatively small content creator in the furry community. In the summer of 2021, she started her journey by getting into VR chat and doing hypnosis sessions. They would range from big group sessions to get everybody to relax.
A nice, relaxing, anxiety-free kind of triggers, so...
which were safe for work, to not so safe for work solo sessions. She would then take the safe for work sessions and upload them on her YouTube channel, and she built a small following by doing exactly that. That is everything you were able to see from the outside. While she seemed like a wholesome person trying to help people in VR chat, she actually was a pretty disturbing individual. Sappho would eventually meet Gray over VR chat, somewhere between July and September of 2021. A 16-year-old teenager. They would talk over Discord, and it would eventually lead to them doing VR online cuddling sessions, and she would kind of take the role as a mother figure in their chats. That eventually escalated to even more inappropriate stuff happening in VR chat. You know, more than just cuddling. Gray fortunately eventually realized that what they were doing was very weird and borderline illegal, so they reported it to the admins of the specific VR chat worlds they visited. The admins swiftly banned Sappho, and she would be perma-banned on the VR chat Discord as well. This is far from over though. Following this ban, Sappho would eventually decide to create her own Discord server for furries and stuff like that, and she would eventually open up a channel for drawn images of animals that were definitely not safe for work, or honestly safe for life. One of the mods, Matcha Tiger, confronted Sappho on this, essentially asking if she was a zoophile. She would go on and say that she respected the community as a therapist and doesn't think of it as anything wrong. Because of that, Matcha then decided to cut ties with Sappho and uploaded a tweet, or a twit longer, exposing her as somebody who supports animal love. In order to sweep this controversy under a rug, Sappho would use a very interesting tactic that definitely backfired. September 11th, 2021, Sappho would post a video coming out about things. A 36-minute rant essentially, where she fully admits to being a zoophile.
I am a zoophile. I do not have a thing for humans. I am more attracted to dogs, like German Shepherds.
In that video, she tries to justify her love for animals by comparing it to the LGBTQ community, who used to be much less accepted than nowadays, which of course is not the best comparison, given that animals can't really give consent. This very video would gain her a ton of backlash and attention from all corners of the internet, including the furry community. Sappho wouldn't step down and make an apology video though, but she doubled down instead, skipping over her response music video to the haters. She would start an organization called Zoophiles Engagement for Tolerance and Acceptance North America, short ZNA, a group that is supposed to act as a safe space for people like Sappho who are also zoophiles or interested in that stuff. Less than 2 months later, this organization would crumble, as somebody inside the organization tried to transfer the very little funds they were able to raise into their own private wallets. And the whole organization and marketing was basically built off of lies, but I won't get into that. This still wouldn't be the end of Sappho's controversial history though. You gotta know, Sappho first denied all the allegations of being attracted to minors and doing stuff with minors. But on December 13th, Sappho would fully admit to being a MAP, which stands for Minor Attracted Person, aka and she admitted to it by making multiple tweets arguing that the age of consent is a iffy thing, etc. She would also talk about her being attracted to younger people, but only sometimes. And her excuse was that most of her partners have actually been older than her. All of this would lead to her Twitter account being suspended. Being suspended on Twitter is a different kind of achievement. She would then also be caught talking inappropriately to other 16-year-olds, which also included exchanging explicit images, voice messages, which I've listened to, and I'm severely traumatized, and doing more than just therapy sessions in VR chat again. So the whole not being attracted to humans was a goddamn lie. If you're eating right now, I'm sorry. Brown-nosed pup, aka Messy Tails, is a very mysterious individual. You could say he's kinda like an urban legend. He published his first tweet on July 29th, 2013, letting the world know that he forgot to wipe his butt. He then tweets that he didn't actually forget to wipe, hinting that he actually likes it that way. His entire account is essentially a pretty detailed documentation of his increasingly more brave experiments with, you know, the brown stuff. A typical tweet of his looks like this: I want to be force-fed meals made with my own mess. Peanut butter and sandwiches, chocolate milkshakes, donuts. His early days mostly consisted of fantasies and made-up scenarios, and this continues for years. Years of him just texting away about his love for Nutella and what he's been up to in his life in general. For example, in August of 2014, he asked the Twitter people if they have messy dreams and what they're like. Or November, where he described how he's not able to sit without leaving stains. Again, I'm really sorry if you're eating right now. 3 entire years go by, where he buys a car, buys a furry suit, and tries to look for an apartment where he can live out his messy dreams. And at this point, he has sent hundreds of tweets with little to no attention from the Twitter community. He gets a couple of likes, but that's pretty much it. He basically tweets to nobody. In 2016, he then starts to post pictures as well. And do not look them up, but yes, they do contain the poopy. All over hands, all over objects, etc. And I feel like this caption says enough. Finally, here's what was left after I licked everything clean. It was a good meal. I might need to clean my paws, but I have a tongue for that. So slowly but surely, he went from fantasies to actually doing the things he wanted to do, with real proof. All of this very interesting behavior wouldn't go unnoticed either, because in August of 2017, 4 years after his first tweet, Messy Tails tweeted this: "Hehe, they can put me in a hospital and make me take pills, but now I'm gone and nobody can stop me from covering myself in the mud." So it's clear that the people around him have noticed his obsession and tried to keep him mentally in check, but it didn't seem to help at all, because just 8 days later he would post, "I need to find a way to become psychologically, irreversibly addicted to the stinky. And can't stop eating poopy." In a matter of a few years, it has gone from some interesting fantasies to a genuinely dangerous addiction that already brought him to the hospital once. And his last ever post would be in 2018. Things have been rough lately. I'm going to be okay, but it might take a while. I hope you're all doing well and staying messy. And then he would go radio silent. About a whole year later, around 2019, Barcrow, a random Twitter user, would reply to one of Messy Tails' posts saying that he has unfortunately died from an overconsumption of his own feces and lack of nutrients. And that is actually what solidified his name within the community. Messy Tails, the person who died because they ate their own matter. But there was no actual proof that this account actually knew what happened to the real Messy Tails. Until 2021, when somebody who also made a video about this interesting individual messaged the account that said all these things. And it turns out it was just BS. So till this day, nobody knows what happened to the real Messy Tails. He might be dead, he might be in the hospital again, or he might still be crunching on his own stuff. Don't Hug Cacti, or DHC, was a very popular company that created fursuits for furries. They would be highly sought after because their fursuits had such high quality and cute designs. The company was founded by Scuff and Lucky, 2 people who were very involved in the furry community. But Lucky would be the reason the successful company would catch on fire and would taint her and her husband's image as these friendly, successful furries. It started on September 25th, 2021, when Cutens published a 100-page document on Twitter with dozens of testimonies accusing Lucky of various crimes. Like a document almost worse than the Diddy files. Within that document there were screenshots of an entire group chat that Lucky was a part of, where she discussed various spicy interests of hers and her being a dom and stuff, with 2 minors in the group chat, fully aware that they were not of age. I go through one of the dozens of testimonies to give you a bigger picture. One person stepped forward and talked about their relationship with Lucky. I call this person Fox. Fox explained how she was very close to Lucky and spent a lot of time with her. They would stay on calls for hours on end until it was late at night. And during these late night calls, Lucky would begin to show Fox non-safe for work drawings of furries. Now Fox was 19 at the time, so it's not illegal, but just kinda weird. But that continued until one day, Fox wanted to go to a party with Lucky. But instead, Lucky allegedly encouraged them to stay at her place to test their drinking limit. Even though, as already said, Fox was 19 at the time, which made her under the legal drinking age. At some point, Fox and Lucky were also more intimate with each other, and Fox described it as a very unpleasant experience. Now the very next day, Lucky then allegedly proceeded to tell multiple people about what they did, and lied about Lucky taking Fox's first time. But the list of accusations goes on. According to Fox and multiple other testimonies, she was fairly open about being a zoo and having her first time with her dog. Now there was never any actual evidence to prove these allegations, but she did have a public Fur Affinity account, which is a platform to post furry art on. And on there she did upload multiple drawings of German Shepherds with various degrees of lewdness. And she drew herself as a dog doing things with German Shepherds. The captions also say stuff like, G-Sheps are so handsome, just can't resist, alongside some other comments, which does indicate that she at least had fantasies about this type of stuff. Like, who would genuinely make these drawings and put themselves in these situations just for fun? And the worst thing is, she actually owned a German Shepherd as a pet at that time, which makes this whole situation just even more disturbing. Lucky also had a very long history of treating her pets very badly and neglecting them, with a pattern of adopting or purchasing pets just to abandon them when they became too difficult to handle. The document that covered all of this spread like a wildfire, and in order to keep DHC from losing sales and going under, they did a ton of things to try to disprove this, such as making tweets, video statements, and going on podcasts. But all of these attempts weren't enough to disprove the mountains of testimonies that the document had. But somehow, despite all the outrage and hate that Lucky and the company received, the operation is still running and making sales till this day. Zelda Wolf, aka Aaron Thomas Usury, spent a lot of his time on DeviantArt, a relatively normal art sharing platform where he would post art of his furry identity. Around September of 2014 though, he would meet these two 12-year-old girls who liked his art. And yes, it goes exactly where you think it'll go. He could have just said thank you and that's it, but instead he decided to talk to both of them. Their relationship started relatively friendly, talking about art and their problems and stuff, but eventually turned more and more inappropriate as they moved from DeviantArt to Skype and Google Hangouts to keep in touch. After some time, it reached a point where he convinced the girls to send pictures and videos of themselves to Aaron. And of course, he would do the same as well. Now, for whatever reason, he also decided to send a video of him having relations with his dog to the 12-year-old girls. This relationship would go unnoticed for months, until the mother of one of the girls actually discovered their videos and chat logs and reported it to the police. On April 11, 2015, the police raided Aaron's home and seized all of his devices, such as laptops and phones, etc. And they found all the evidence they needed, and so he was arrested on April 12th and sentenced to 17 years. So for once, somebody was actually punished for their crimes, which unfortunately isn't the case for the next person. Court Kitty, aka Gabriel Sickle, is a 30-year-old furry who has been in the community for years. He makes music and is kind of a dancer, I guess, but he isn't actually known for any of these artistic endeavors of his. He actually made his first waves within the furry community because of his smell. His fursuit apparently reeked so bad that people were actively avoiding him at conventions. It got so bad that somebody even put a note on his door that literally just says stinker. And given that people walk around with a literal mask on their head at these conventions, which makes smelling things a lot harder, this was an achievement for sure. Now, despite all that, he actually managed to get married, with of course a furry themed wedding, and he became a father as well. And this is where his first serious controversy begins. Once he actually had a son, he decided to bring him to a baby fur meetup. A baby fur is essentially a furry who likes to roleplay as a younger character or a baby. This community also has a lot of common with the ABDL community, which stands for Adult Baby Diaper Lover, which are adults who like to wear baby clothes and diapers. Obviously now, this can probably be something innocent and stuff, but there's no denying that non-safe for work activities are very present within these communities. So bringing your actual infant child to such a meetup would be very, very disturbing. Luckily, he decided to not go through that because of all the backlash he got from that idea. He himself justified it by saying that the idea of bringing an infant child to a baby fur meetup would be pretty funny, and that his intentions were innocent. Well, Court Kitty would also be caught following multiple non-safe for work cup accounts on Twitter. Cup referring to baby animals. And now combine this with non-safe for work. Yeah, you kind of get it, right? So he definitely had some kind of attraction to younger beings. On top of that, he also commissioned baby fur art of his own son, which leaves even a worse aftertaste. Now remember when I said he got married? Well, his wife would divorce him just 3 years after because of exactly these reasons. And some more. During the divorce and fight for custody of the children, his wife would point out that he had bookmarked a guide on having relations with dogs. Yes, a tutorial on how to make love to your dog. And he had also saved the zoozadist website. Zoozadist being people who derive pleasure from hurting animals. Now he would use the excuse of saying, I was just curious though, and pointed out that he would never actually engage in that type of stuff. Which doesn't really hold up when his wife also pointed out that she walked in on him when he and his dog were doing things with peanut butter. If you don't know what that means, dogs like to lick peanut butter. Gabe would also straight up admit to his wife that he had relations multiple times with dogs, which isn't far-fetched, because he admitted himself that he enjoys videos of cats mating, and followed and was friends with a ton of furries who were proven to be zoozadist, and straight up just PDF files, and they were actually convicted of their crimes, such as Growley, who will come up in just a second. He also talked to a 17-year-old when he was 27, Dr. Disrespect style, and a few more other things. Now Gabriel still tries to defend all of these allegations and still remains active on social media, even though the entire furry community has essentially shunned him. Mr. Teriyaki and Acid Rain Cloud are a couple in the furry community, and at least Teriyaki would be known for his dance performances during conventions or on YouTube, but both of them would actually rise to semi-celebrity status after one particular conversation was leaked. On August 22nd, 2023, Soul Smoothie would post a chat between their partner and Acid Rain Cloud, where Acid Rain Cloud reveals one very disturbing thing Acid and Mr. Teriyaki like to do in bed. Now I'm nobody to judge, but I'm definitely gonna judge what they've been doing. Acid reveals that they like to play with fish. Essentially what they would do is fill Acid Rain Cloud with water and fish, you know, inside. Yeah, some messed up stuff. They would then engage in the act, and most fish would not make it. And the ones that do make it get put back in the bowl, just waiting until they decide to do it again. The self-snitching at this point ends with, it sounds kinda harsh to the fish, but it's kinda amazing. This does indeed not sound amazing. Now let's get into the darkest and most disturbing furries roaming this planet. Kero the Wolf was a very popular furry YouTuber. He's been part of the furry community since 2012. Probably before some of y'all were even born. He was also in a Shane Dawson video where he was interviewed about his life as a furry, and he was one of the people who made this whole thing more mainstream and portrayed it as just a hobby instead of something weird. But of course he wouldn't be in this iceberg if things didn't take a very dark turn in September of 2018. That month some of Kero's Telegram logs were leaked, and if y'all know anything about Telegram, some sus behavior goes down there. Those chat logs allegedly showed him involved in some pretty disturbing stuff. It basically revealed that he was a part of a circle of furries who participated in not only but also necrophilia, animal torture, and discussions of being attracted to minors, which is all very illegal. The original leak came from Zoodenim, somebody who was a part of that circle and a self-proclaimed zoo. But he himself was so disturbed by all of that he just had to leak it, so you can imagine what was going on. The chat contained Kero and other members of the group talking about doing it with animals that are not alive anymore. He describes how he prefers animals who are already not breathing instead of turning them into this state just for the sake of performing what they want to perform. And a ton of graphic videos were also leaked. And quite a lot of them depict furries inside that group doing the most disturbing things to animals even imaginable. There were so many crimes being admitted in that chat by just Kero alone, such as him doing things to his dog, Coda, and feeling guilty after he passed away. These types of allegations will obviously destroy a person's career, and before those leaks he was one of the big faces of the furry community, and so the internet did a lot of digging to see if the claims were actually true, and Kero obviously denied all of these allegations by saying that he was hacked and it was all fake. Communities such as the 4chan community and Kiwi Farms analyzed every single message and video that was sent in there, and it would turn out that the Kero that was in the group chat talked about so many intricate details of his life that it would be almost impossible to fake. But one of the biggest pieces of evidence that would prove that Kero was almost 100% part of his group chat and this community would be the Beast Forum, an absolute vile website dedicated to zoo posts talking about how they have relations with animals and giving each other advice on that type of stuff. One of the profiles that was active on this very website was called the Dogman 2, just one out of these thousands of registered accounts. But something about this profile was different. On January 22nd, 2012, so way before those leaks would even surface, the Dogman would post a picture of a dog that looked eerily similar to a dog that Kero posted on his public Fur Affinity page. But if you actually look at the dates, Kero's dog was posted on their forum months before it appeared on any public social media of his, so there was no way that the Dogman 2 just ripped off the image off of Kero's page. His other posts on Beast Forum also aligned with the exact timeline of Kero's life. For example, when he moved to a college in Pittsburgh, there was a post from the Dogman asking to meet other zoophiles in the Oakdale area, and coincidentally, Oakdale is a suburb of Pittsburgh. Once people started noticing this suspicious pattern, Kero deleted all of the photos of his dog from his Fur Affinity account. Kero was obviously panicking and trying to erase evidence. The netizens then found a video of a furry having relations with their dog. Terribly disturbing, but putting that aside, the person who appeared in that video shared a lot of similar traits with Kero, such as having the exact same shoes and the exact same sweater. Now the dog that had to be in that video also had the same facial pattern, same white front paws, same white fur on the chest, and same red collar like the dog Coda. It was pretty clear. Years of chat logs that precisely matches with Kero's life, an account that somehow has access to pictures before Kero was able to post them on any of his socials, and a video that showed a person that matches almost identically with Kero himself. Kero was indeed a zoozadist, and probably more. Once the internet gathered all that evidence, it was submitted to the police, but he was never charged. Most likely because bestiality is treated as a minor crime in New York, so he can only take legal actions for up to 2 years after the crime happened, and the proof was submitted after that 2-year time frame. So legally there was nothing that could punish him. Now Kero is still certain that he's innocent, and even made a couple of videos trying to explain that all of this was fake. But of course, after all this evidence surfaced, nobody believed him. But at least some of the other members in that group chat were actually charged, such as somebody with the name of Snake Thing, who I'll also talk about. Shadow Wolfus is probably the face of disturbing furries, and he earned that title for a reason. To properly introduce him, I'll read you his own bio that he made over a decade ago. I'm a 52-year-old furry bisexual, male, bi, pretty sure you just said that, but okay, and an active plushie file, but it doesn't stop there. As you may know, there's this fact going around the internet that furries will spend thousands of dollars on their hobby. Well, one of the reasons why is because fursuits go for crazy amounts, like you could buy a car with that type of money. So some people decide to create their own fursuits instead. Shadow Wolfus, aka William Bill J. Clark, being one of them. But instead of buying new materials, he would use the plushies that he bought to have fun with and cut them up to make his fursuits. And this is how these abominations were created. That is why he's also known as Carpet Sample. They do not just look even more terrifying than the dolphin muzzles, but also smelled worse. This suit is known as the worst and most disgusting fursuit ever created, and that is because he never cleaned the plushies that he had relations with, and so they reeked of urine and other substances that I won't mention. Every person who met him in real life was probably traumatized by that smell. Shadow Wolfus somehow has multiple pets and openly talks about engaging with all of them regularly, like very open. He described in detail what he did to them without any shame whatsoever. He literally admits to getting these pets only for this one reason, and you can kinda tell by the pictures. His place has trash everywhere, like he does not actually care about the health of his pets whatsoever. One of the tamest statements of his is that he hasn't had any relations with a male husky yet, but will soon once he gets one for a pet. That is the tamest, most family-friendly sentence that he wrote. Shadow Wolfus even dedicated his entire job to his hedonistic pleasures, I guess, since he once was a dog walker, and you can kinda guess what happened to these unlucky animals that had to be with him. He wouldn't be a very disturbing individual only towards dogs and the internet though. First, he got banned from multiple conventions because of his behavior. For example, he was once banned from the Method Fur Meet for proposing to have relations with another furry called Moonstone Wind and her service dog while alone in an elevator with her. Moonstone Wind must have been absolutely terrified, not only because of his proposal that included her dog, but also probably because of his smell. In general, he would just go up to people and start a conversation about all of the disgusting things he does, like just randomly. Not surprisingly, he also convinced a minor to do stuff for alcohol, but luckily he hasn't been active in over a decade now. Growley, or Daniel Mitsuho Lamas, has been in the furry community since 1999. In the year 2000, he met this person online who was really interested in him and his boyfriend at the time, Troy Gate. So interested to the point that he wanted to play with both of them. That person was a minor, and Growley continually told him that he couldn't do anything with him because of that reason. He was a grown adult after all. The conversation between him and that boy continued through 2001, until about March, when his boyfriend and Growley decided to finally meet up with him. Growley didn't actually want to meet up, but was convinced to do so by both his boyfriend and that other person. So Troy and Daniel booked hotel rooms to stay at, and they actually met that person in real life. It eventually got late, and his boyfriend insisted on staying in the hotel room with that boy they talked to. Growley was actually against that idea because it seemed kinda inappropriate, but he was only 24 at the time and young and impressionable, so he ended up staying there as well, and they all slept in the same hotel room. And that's it. At least that's the version that Growley told the public. In reality, Growley actually sent inappropriate images to that boy, and once they met up, he and his boyfriend actually got caught having relations with him in that hotel room and took photos during the act. The boy then actually contacted the authorities on June 4th, and when Growley was just at home with his parents, the police came in and detained him with over 10 charges to his name. He and his boyfriend first denied all of the allegations, but eventually pleaded guilty after months of trying to get a better deal and negotiating. So he served 2 years of a 3-year sentence and became a registered offender for life. It doesn't end there though. When does it ever, right? After being released and finishing his parole, he would be caught again talking to a 16-year-old on Fur Affinity. The 16-year-old talks about being able to do something because of yoga, and I think I sadly know what he's talking about, but I'm not gonna say it out loud. If you know, you know. He then elaborated that he can't show Growley because he's shy, and if word got out, the FBI would be after. Growley of course responds with, he won't report him if he's not of age yet. Spiral Wolf then suggests that he should do yoga too, so he'll be able to do the same thing. And Growley ends the conversation with, you could show me. I won't tell, XD. He really did not take any breaks after being released from prison, because after that conversation got leaked, the internet did just a bit more digging, and they actually found a few other chat logs between Daniel and another guy who wasn't of age either. Growley being 33 at the time, and the other person's 17. Again, I will not go into detail what they actually talk about, but they basically both describe what they would do if they met up and stuff. Imagine like 50 Shades of Grey, but even worse and even more weird. These attempts to do stuff with guys that were literally half his age unfortunately would go unpunished. But the universe did its thing on July 10th, 2019, where he would be charged with possessions of movies that included children. And I'm not talking about Toy Stories. But he was somehow actually released on September 26th, which is crazy. Only a couple of months for literally owning the most deprived videos imaginable. Now all of that did result in him getting banned from a couple of furry conventions, such as Antho Northwest 2017, but he's still welcome to attend most of the other conventions, even though almost the entire furry community is very much against him going on any conventions at all anymore. He also beefed with a lot of people on Twitter who exposed his past, saying that he's a changed person now and stuff, which I don't know if that's how it works. Can somebody like him really just change? But his account is now private. Lockjaw Arts was a company run by Blackcraft Witch, aka Tanya R. Dillard, and their partner Jax Luna, aka Jacob Berkowitz. And similar to DHC, they made fursuits. Now, even though the Lockjaw Arts account was kind of, you know, a company social media account, they didn't only talk about their product, but shared very intimate details about themselves as well, like how they struggled with mental health, depression, and stuff like that. These personal issues cause a lot of delays for the customer, because they might have promised to have a fursuit made until this date, but because of their personal struggles, they weren't able to fulfill the order. And if that happens enough times, business will obviously suffer, because people will lose trust in your company and brand. And that was most likely the case, which resulted in serious financial struggles for them. And safe to say, mental health problems and money struggles are a dangerous combination. In March of 2020, Tanya and Jacob concocted a plan to make some quick cash to get out of this tricky situation they're in. They created a dating ad on Craigslist, which is apparently a thing, I don't know. And Hector Hernandez actually responded. It was definitely some trio lobby kind of ad, because on March 27th, Hector picked both of them up and took them to his residence. Now unfortunately, instead of doing what they actually promised in the ad, they robbed him instead and pew-pewed him 4 times and then stabbed him another 25 times at least, until he passed away in his own bathroom. Now after robbing him, first thing you gotta do is obviously phone a friend and snitch on yourself. And yes, Tanya did exactly that. She called her friend Paige and first told her that she and her boyfriend had taken a dog's life and skinned it, which was obviously very shocking to hear. But Tanya responded to her disturbed reaction with, "If you think that is strange, I'm sitting next to a not so alive person," and then sent Paige a picture of Hector. And this is where Paige actually drew the line and decided to report the incident to the police. They immediately set up surveillance at Hector's residence and observed the couple. Now their initial plan was to rob him, take his car, and go live in the woods for the rest of their lives. So they eventually decided to execute the second part of the plan and left the house with his Mercedes. To be honest, I don't know why the police just didn't take action immediately, but both Tanya and Jacob would actually be detained after a traffic stop, where they admitted to everything. During the interrogation or interview, Tanya actually told a different story of why they took Hector's life. She explained that they made an ad asking to be driven somewhere, but Hector actually touched Tanya's leg and tried to kiss them, and so Jacob hit him in the spur of the moment. But Jacob just flat out admitted that it was a planned attack, so they were both charged with 4 felony counts, but I couldn't find anywhere how many years they actually got. If you've paid attention to the Kero the Wolf story, you'll have seen the username Snake Thing pop up a couple of times. Well, he is arguably worse than Kero, by far. His real name is Levi Dane Simmons, and he was born on December 20th, 1994. He already got into the whole thing from an early age. His first encounter was when he was around 8 or 9. One day he was just home alone and decided for whatever reason to bend over in front of the family dog at the time. A similar thing to the peanut butter incident then happened. The people around him were also already cautious of him. For example, he was once kicked off of the school bus because he did inappropriate things to his classmates. This sentence sums it up perfectly. He's had problems for a long time. Skipping a few years, when he was in the middle of puberty, he was already getting into the more hardcore stuff in terms of watching and doing, which of course also included animals. And this sick interest of his would only worsen over time. He joined the furry community around May or June of 2010 after he talked about the fandom just out of curiosity with a friend, and he found his kind of people in that community relatively fast. People who shared the same dark, twisted secrets. And so one day he decided to create the infamous Susadum Telegram group that I already talked about. He shared his experiences within that group, such as having relations with a literal baby, and he would try to push the others in that group to do these things as well. He liked corrupting them. Like a lot of people that I already mentioned, he took advantage of vulnerable people and animals. Like this 12-year-old girl that he convinced to do stuff on camera, who was just very confused and opening up to him, as well as the times where he did things to his sister's dogs. And he also actively enjoyed hurting animals. Probably one of the most sickening stories is how Snake Thing describes in detail how he had relations with a 10 to 12-week-old puppy with the help of a friend. They first gave her medication and then did the most brutal stuff you can imagine. Like literally the most brutal stuff. But it resulted in the dog wiggling and twitching and yelping and whining, despite the medication they gave that puppy. He also said that at least over half the time it was unconsciously done. He was nervous at first, but once he got going, all of his doubts melted away. He described the experience as fantastic. After they were done, he asked his friend to leave the pup somewhere in the town, but he wasn't even sure whether or not his friend just straight up ended the dog. Not just the messages were evidence enough though. They filmed the entire thing and took photos, some of them containing his entire face. And there's actually a reason for that. Normally, if you're a part of such a group, you would try to hide your identity, because you either know deep down that what you're doing is incredibly disturbing and wrong, or you just don't want to get caught by the police. But Snake Thing actually liked that feeling. He liked being blackmailed, and sometimes deliberately shared private information, like his full name, to the others, who could potentially expose him. And he also just liked bragging about the things he did, basically incriminating himself. And that eventually led to his demise. As I already said, Pseudonym eventually leaked the entire group chat and actively led Snake Thing on for 2 entire years to collect as much information as possible, so he would hopefully end up in jail or at least be exposed for the monster he is. With all that information, the internet was basically able to find out everything about him. They found an address, they already knew his full government name, and they quickly found all the alt accounts that he created to try and hide. And all this information was forwarded to the local authorities. But when the police eventually showed up to his place, they found nothing. He and his family haven't actually lived at that address for over a year. And for Snake Thing, all of this happened so quickly that he panicked, and so he even ran from his current home. Around this time, his mother also got wind of all of this stuff happening, because one of his friends admitted to what they did, and she was understandably distraught. Maybe he will come clean to me. Maybe I can convince him to just go to the police. And I go with him. I know it's scary, but he has no survival skills. I don't believe in shielding people from their consequences of their actions. Please don't tell him I know or he will run. I want to talk to him, and at what point he actually came back to the house, I'm not sure. But on October 25th, 2018, the police went to his new address and arrested him with charges of everything basically. Animal neglect, animal SA, and more. And they seized all of his devices that contained a lot of evidence. The furry community and the internet was happy. He was about to be punished, even if it's just a fraction of what he actually did. A win is a win. Well, 3 days later, he would be released again.
Hello?
Hello.
Hello, I was wondering if I could call and ask on the status of a current inmate.
Who's that?
Levi Dane Simmons.
He was released.
Would it be a case just like Kero's? And would Snake Thing be a free man because of some technicality, like the evidence being submitted too late? 2 entire days pass without anybody knowing what's gonna happen to him. When the news comes out that the district attorney is still pursuing charges, but they wanted more than to just punish him for animal neglect. They wanted to punish him for all of the crimes he did, such as him filming content of children that weren't inappropriate at all. All the evidence was there, but they needed to prevent him from taking any deal that might land him only 2 or 3 years instead of the time he actually deserved. So they had to drop the charges for now to sort through the mountains of videos and chat logs, etc. It was a gamble. He would be a free man for now and could do God knows what, but it's hopefully gonna worth it when he gets sentenced for an even longer time. And he was a free man for quite a while actually. It took over a year until he would be apprehended again on December 4th, 2019. But now, along his initial charges, he would be charged with additional 31 other things, such as 19 counts of encouraging inappropriate behavior towards children in the 2nd degree, which is like owning movies of, children and stuff. I'm not stretching. 19 counts of just that. On March 9th, 2020, he ended up entering a plea deal, which is kind of like this negotiation thing, but he was still sentenced to 300 months, aka 25 years, and is a registered offender for life. So he's actually gonna come out in his 50s. This is the Yost family. They consist of Jennifer Goodwill Yost, her husband Christopher Yost, and 3 children, 2 of them being only 6 and 9, and the oldest one, Caitlin, being 17. The entire family, but of course especially mom, stepdad, and Caitlin, were very involved in the furry fandom. They would quite regularly meet up with other furries and play bowling, the group being called La Habra Fur Bowling, and be attendees at the Prancing Skill Tear monthly parties. Jennifer was kind of seen as the local mom of the community. She was known for her kindness and always helping others if they had any problems. She also made like clothes and stuffed animals for her children. Wholesome, furry, family, fun stuff. Through all of these activities, the family eventually met Frank Felix and Josh Acosta, who are of course both furries as well. And Josh was actually also involved in the brony community, which is apparently a male fan of the TV show My Little Pony, Friendship is Magic. But that actually isn't important to the story. I just didn't know about that and wanted to share my findings. Anyways, they both kind of became acquaintances to the family, and especially Frank would start talking more and more to Caitlin. On Facebook, they would talk about both having experienced bullying and their shared interests in the furry community and anime. Now, because of the age gap that was present, Frank was 25 and she was 17, the people around him started talking about that dynamic and how their friendship might be inappropriate, Also, Caitlin was kind of known for having dated older men that her parents didn't approve of, so that played a factor as well. But nonetheless, Caitlin kept talking to both Frank and Josh for a couple of months, until her parents actually stepped in and told her to stop talking to them. They wanted to protect her, right? But we all know if parents try to forbid a relationship like that, it almost never actually works out. On a Saturday morning, to be more specific, September 24th, 2016, the police dispatchers receive a 911 call from a very, very young girl. That little girl speaks into the phone and says, "My parents are..." By 8:26 AM, the police arrive at the scene and they find 3 people. All of them passed away because of gunshot wounds. But there are still 2 people in the house, 2 children. The little girl who called, who is 6, and another child who is 9. Now, according to the records, there's supposed to be a 17-year-old girl living here as well, but she's nowhere to be found. The very next day, the police arrest 2 main suspects. And you might have guessed it already, they arrest Josh Acosta and Frank Felix. And the missing girl Caitlin was taken into custody as well. Now what exactly happened? Did Frank and Caitlin plan out the killing of her parents so they can live out their forbidden relationship? I mean, it was also known that Caitlin was emotionally unstable, so it could be. Surprisingly, the reality is even darker than that. As Caitlin became closer with both of them, she actually confessed to Josh that her stepfather has done inappropriate things to her, and it was happening on a weekly basis from the ages of 7 to 15, and her mother never knew about the situation. One thing led to another, and the group decided that Josh and Frank would go over to Caitlin's house and tell the mom about the inappropriate things that happened, and then get Caitlin as far away from the house as possible. That's it. Just a very uncomfortable conversation. Frank gave Josh a ride to the house, and Caitlin and Frank then waited in the truck while Josh entered the residence. But instead of talking, Josh just straight up pew-pewed the mother, the stepfather, and a family friend who just happened to be there at the time. Josh just kinda saw him as collateral damage. After finishing that, Josh went back to the car and they all drove away. Caitlin somehow didn't hear anything and didn't even know what Josh just did to her parents. Jumping back to the arrest, by September 27th, Frank and Josh were charged with 3 counts of murder. Because it turns out that Frank, who stayed in the car, actually helped destroy evidence and provided Josh with the that he used. So both of them planned that without involving Caitlin at all. Even though the police thought that Caitlin might be a suspect as well, she was actually granted immunity because of her testimony, and the 2 children who were in the house at the time received counseling and were relocated to live with their relatives. The person who happened to be at the house at the time, who had nothing to do with any of this at all, had a 3-year-old daughter, which was pretty tragic. Really just wrong time, wrong place. If you want to watch another video about disturbing things, you can click on this video.